On the basis of scientific data, the aim of this documentary is to bring closer the course of a slope movement. The area of interest is located in the northwest of the Czech Republic in the region of České Středohoří. Passing over the digital terrain model, there is shown a large morphological fragmentation of the České Středohoří. The morphological fragmentation of the site is conditioned by the geological structure and the processes of the landscape formation. Detail of the geomorphological conditions and the geological structure on the basis of the geological map of the area of interest and photos of the rock environment in the quarry and at the site of the scarp of a landslide after remediation. Landscape development documented by aerial images from 2001, 2008, 2011, and 2013. Bounded by purple lines, the development of the terrain morphology over time, and especially the area of the Dobkovičky quarry, are well represented in a series of aerial images from Google Earth. It is obvious that the area of the quarry did not change fundamentally between 1984 and 2016. As part of the surveys carried out for the construction of the D8 motorway in the area of interest, the boreholes were located only on the route of the planned motorway, and the area of the previously identified potentially unstable parts of the slope on the southeast slope of the hill Hrubešová was not verified. The boreholes in the landslide area were shallow, drilled only within 12 meters from the original terrain, where 6 meters of the rock mass were removed from the Z5 road cut. The resulting exploration of the underground mass under the highway was therefore 6 meters. Looking at the landslide, it is necessary to realize that the concept of displacing volcanic and underlying Cretaceous rock slopes in the area of interest and its surroundings by landslides has been known for more than 100 years. For 14 kilometers south of Dobkovičky, on the slope under the castle of Hasenberg, there were activated landslides in 1882, 1898, 1900, and 1939, and in 1898 and 1900, it destroyed houses in the village of Klapi. Directly in the area of interest, there is documented this concept. For example, a profile of a rock mass published by Professor Pospíšil and engineer Kudrna as part of an article in 1996 at a conference in Bratislava. The edge of the overlying Balsat rock on the tophitic rocks and clays is broken up in the area of interest into large blocks, depicted in the color violet, which were and are gradually buried in the soft subsoil and are gravitationally sloping downhill with simultaneous weathering and decay. The most were the case in the Pleistocene epoch. In the archive of the Czech Geological Survey, the territory is documented as potentially sliding. The geological geomorphological map compiled in 1972 for the D8 motorway in the Hotimers Radicin section documents the rock environment, including the landslides. The landslide documented in 1972 corresponds to the landslide location in 2013 as evidenced by the georeferencing of the map from 1972 to the current map with a marked 2013 landslide. For clarity, both landslides are georeferenced to the 3D terrain model in the map view and in the aerial images after the landslide activation. The red part represents the colluvial sediments with a higher thickness in the area of the railway. A detailed view of the 2013 landslide 3D model from the northeast with the red-marked area of the colluvium and the gray-marked area of the equilibrated landslide documented in 1972. From the exact data on rock masses at site, represented by small local landslides in the cut of the motorway and the deformations on the slope to the quarry mentioned in the building logs, this map of the development of the faults was compiled. It is important to emphasize that the first deformation of the rock mass occurred already in 2009 and was accompanied by spills of groundwater that were not encountered at the time of the survey, and the groundwater level at the landslide area was not documented. In the building logs, the deformation of the highway's road map was clearly documented more than a month before the start of the landslide. Shortly before activation of the landslide on June 5th, a tensile fracture below the railroad track was observed, which in its position coincided with the documented crack in the landslide after its sliding. The mine floor deformation in the quarry followed and was the last recorded. Then the main phase of the landslide followed. For the purpose of slope deformation analysis, a detailed engineering geological model was created based on available data from boreholes realized mostly after the landslide activation. The engineering geological model was created three-dimensionally, consisting of 7 basic quasi-homogeneous units representing specified engineering geological types. These quasi-homogeneous units are underlying marlstone, weathered marlstone, tertiary aged tophitic rocks, basalts, lower fine-grained colluvium forming a sliding zone of landslide. For sloping the model, it is projected into the landslide area. These units are then covered with colluvial sediments of coarse-grained and fine-grained sediments at the bottom of the slope. Here is a model of the rock environment covered by a map of the surface of the terrain with the defining of the protected mineral deposit area of the Dobkovičky quarry, represented by the color green, and the mining area of the Dobkovičky quarry is defined by the blue line. Note that the highway intersects the protected deposit area. An important aspect of slope stability and landscape activation is the saturation of the rock environment with water. In the 3-year period preceding the landslide, rainfall was above the long-term average. To evaluate the process of saturation of the rock environment with water, a hydrological model was constructed to simulate the amount of water from the precipitation, which is recharged into the rock mass, evaporates, and flows through the surface runoff. The results of this model, namely the recharge regime, were used in the hydrogeological model of groundwater flow. The animation shows the gradual saturation of individual quasi-homogeneous units to full saturation, shown in red. From the view, we gradually get it from the overburden on the subsoil, as seen on the embedded 3D model of the rock environment. Essential is the full saturation in the central part of the model, where the low fine-grained colluvium forms the sliding zone of the landslide. As the results show, heavy rainfalls immediately before the landslide were a trigger of the landslide, but the saturation conditions of the rock mass with impacts on the area stability conditions have arisen long-term, at least in the previous 3-year period. In this complicated morphological, engineering geological, and hydrogeological conditions, we cannot assess the stability of the landslide area without the 3D numerical model. Unlike 2D numerical models, these 3D numerical models more objectively capture the behavior of such a complicated, unstable area and thus allow for more realistic modeling results. The stability of the sliding area is quantified by the factor of stability. A slope with a factor of stability of less than 1 is considered unstable. A slope with a factor of stability greater than 1 is then classified as a stable slope, with stability increasing with the increasing value of slope stability factor. The results of the spatial stability calculation document the problem area from a stability point of view at the site of the railway embankment before the execution of the D8 motorway road cut. The factor of slope stability at an elevated groundwater level reaches 1.1, which illustrates the label balance state of the entire underlying sliding area. The results of the model calculation in partial profiles then illustrate the existence of a global deep shear zone and a partial local shear zone in the railway area before the road cut. After the road cut, at the increased groundwater level, the maximum shear strains are moved to the slope area of the Z5 road cut. The factor of stability drops below 1, the stability of the slope is lost, and the landslide is activated. A detailed evaluation of the results of the modeling with the effect of the highway road cut documents the mechanism of the landslide. After realization of the road cut, the interconnection of the local shear zones in the place of the road cut as well as in the place of the railway with the global shear zone is apparent. The landslide is extended towards the upper part of the slope along sliding surfaces, and the upper part of the slope is gradually sliding under the Dobkovičky quarry. On the basis of the comprehensive assessment of the rock environment on the southeast slope of Kobačka Hill under the Dobkovičky quarry, based on the engineering geological model, hydrological model, hydrogeological model, and the geotechnical model that evaluated the stability of the slope, this animation was created to document the landslide movement. As mentioned above, the slope was temporarily in the state of labile equilibrium after the Z5 road cut, and due to long-term precipitation and saturation of the rock environment with water, this equilibrium was disturbed. First, small slides were activated in the slopes of the highway, and water overflows have been observed since 2009. Subsequently, there were partial deformations in the slope in the form of terrain drops and cracks, demonstrably more than a month before the landslide activation, which was documented in the building log, and only on June 5th, and in particular on June 6th, there was a deformation of the quarry breaking on the 4th floor. It should be noted, however, that on June 5th, a tensile crack under the railway line was documented, which could not have occurred if the upper part of the rock mass pushed the bottom. These movements took the form of a creep of the parts of the massive. Then, on the night of the 6th to 7th, the activation of the landslide in the lower part was performed by a translational movement of the thin plate on a shallow shear plane and subsequently propagated up the slope, and there was a breach of stability in the area with a higher thickness of the colluvium defined by Professor Pospíšil in 1972. Notice the different terrain morphology after a landslide in its lower part, where the trees were in their original position, and in the upper part of the landslide, where the tensile stress was created and the rotation of the rock mass occurred while sliding and the terrain was severely damaged. Finally, part of the crushed aggregate storage of fraction 8/16 was torn down. A summarized landslide animation is as follows.